Thank you so much for joining us today. The webinar is Teaching Effectiveness, Elements of Presence for Adult Learners, presented by Dr. Brian Kynes and Dr. Stephen Roth. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today. I am Dr. Brian Kynes. I'm a professor in the graduate school at Kaiser University, and I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Roth.
And I'm Steve Roth. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm also professor and advisor here in the Graduate School of Education. Very happy to be here and presenting with Dr. Kynes.
Well, we are excited to present teaching effectiveness. And I'm just noticing right now that it is focused, it says on adult learners, but we're presenting a model that really was not built for adult learners necessarily. It was built for traditional classrooms. There's a foundational seminal model that we'll talk about, the teaching effectiveness model. And that was formed back in the 70s. And 80s, and then we will also discuss the community of inquiry model, which is sort of the application model for teaching effectiveness. And so that's sort of our approach today.
And let me say that although this is focused for adult learners, really all of these strategies that we'll be talking today is absolutely applicable to the K-12 classroom. I've been a K-12 teacher many, many years in the past, and all of these strategies are absolutely geared to being an effective teacher in the classroom as well. So that's why I like this model, because it's for adults and for children as well.
Well, absolutely. And you know, here's the thing that's interesting. Dr. Roth and I, we are responsible for running the doctoral and master's programs at Kaiser University in the graduate school. And we certainly do teach adults. However, these models we use and apply primarily, the way I use it, and Dr. Roth too, is that when we are asked to observe a classroom of one of our professor colleagues and look at how they're doing, evaluate their work, we use these models. These models tell us how well a professor is doing in a college classroom. They will show, if you apply these models to a K-12 classroom, no matter what the setting is. So we might have a number of special education teachers out there today in this webinar. We might have administrators that are looking at traditional and special ed and all different kinds of classrooms to evaluate things. So that's what we're working on. So I think the model works that way. One thing I wanted to mention is you'll see the little Google logo in these slides. So you'll see the logo plus some keywords. So when you see that, you can go to your phone and you can search on Google those keywords, and you'll find more information so you can read more about the topic that we're discussing.
Okay, when we're looking at our model, which is the teacher effectiveness model, it goes in a very integral way to our practical application, which is the community of inquiry model, and we'll be talking about different aspects of that, the content, the teaching aspect, as well as the social aspect in the model, and you will see how all of these are extremely valuable to have a unique understanding of where this awareness is of the teacher in the classroom.
We will spend a little time now talking about the teaching effectiveness model. This is the original model from the 70s, and there we call it the 7 principles. And you can see those principles here, which are sort of the foundation, that there are student-teacher contact, there's cooperation among students, active learning is a critical element, that we provide prompt feedback in the moment or in a timely way to assignments and to interactions. We emphasize time on task. We communicate high expectations. Dr. Roth and I were just talking about that teachers in every classroom are leaders. And how do leaders emphasize their core values, but by setting expectations that are high and communicating them over and over again. That's what high expectations says in this model. And then also respect for diverse talents.
Now, you can see, although these are the traditional and classic principles, they're not dated. They're as actual and important as they were then as they are today. So this is what I can, this is how I use it, even in my teaching practice every moment of the day. This is what's important, and I think these are not something we say, oh no, they're old, they're in the past. No, they're active and they're valuable.
Well, there are, those 7 principles. This is exactly what Dr. Roth just said. They're timeless, and it relates to all different settings. And as I said previously, it doesn't matter what classroom you're in. Those 7 principles are timely and perfect. So let's talk about the community inquiry model. There are 3 different parts of that model. Dr. Roth's going to talk about it here in just a second, but look for cognitive presence, teaching presence, and social presence. These are the 3, sort of the 3-legged stool by which the model is propped upon. And so let's take a look here at how they work together.
Well, cognitive presence is something that's essential, that any teacher, whether it be in the classroom or online or in an adult classroom, has to have and has to be recognized by the students in the classroom. If you don't have that cognitive presence, if you don't have that expertise in the field, something's going to be lacking. You're going to have a difficult time getting across that message and building that rapport and affinity in the classroom if you cannot demonstrate that you know the field of which you are involved in the classroom.
Well, cognitive presence was grounded in the work of one of our favorite theorists. I know we're kind of going egghead here talking about theorists, but John Dewey, you almost can't avoid his work if you've done any coursework whatsoever in educational psychology or the history of education. John Dewey comes up. And the whole notion of Dewey was sort of the interaction between the content and the learner. And, it seems crazy today that we're talking about this, but remember, John Dewey was around between 1850 and 1952. He was a crazy man to think that. I mean, these are the days of the old English model, the German model, where you dictate to the learner what, the student, and impart your knowledge upon them. But Dewey's notion is that we should think about and reflect on what we hear.
Well, he broke out from the authoritarian model of, let's say, traditional education in the past by using the concept of reflection. Reflection today is so important in everything we do, not just in the classroom naturally, but this is what guides us thinking about the past and how it can affect our present and the future. So that's what the difference between what was Dewey and then what Dewey brought into education, modern education today.
Well, I think about this, Dr. Roth. I love the backfire effect because, this is what you constantly tell me every day, is that if I don't think about what I'm doing, I'm going to regret it. And that's exactly what the backfire effect is. Not all of us have Dr. Roth around to tell us when it's time to be backfired. So I am very lucky.
I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing to have me around so much.
Well, I need the guidance for darn sure, because somebody else who would be a great guide would be Donald Schoen, who wrote a book about reflection, and that's based on the same concept, which is reflective practice, reflecting in practice, reflecting on practice. And then Agrilis came up with the notion of double loop learning. And if you Google these two, we aren't going to spend any time on it, but I gave you the Google prompts to look at these two. These are 2 important pieces of reflection on cognitive learning that all teachers should be very aware of, because these are not just about what is it the learner is doing, This is about what is the teacher doing to engage the learner in the content.
Well, the phase of cognitive presence, we have a trigger event, something that makes the whole process begin. Then we have exploration, integration, even resolution. And we can even look at these 4 phases, and I can apply this to a dissertation. Trigger event is your problem statement, your topic, your introduction. Exploration can be your lit review. Integration would be your methodology and the implementation and treatment of whatever you want to study, and resolution would be the results, would be your evaluation, your assessment. And this is such a perfect example of even the scientific method that's so important in understanding the entire concept of cognitive presence.
You know, what's very interesting about this, and as we bring this up, previously we talked about how do you use the model to evaluate a classroom, okay? I think about this in the teachers in my program, and I'm like, okay, is this teacher have cognitive presence or not? Well, you can just look at these 4 phases. Does this teacher provide a triggering event? Is there a triggering event that prompts the learner to get engaged in the content? And I think we all can think about teachers in our past who are probably teachers we don't think about often, who basically are just blathering out content. Blah, 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 blah. Here's the content. Any questions? Blah, 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 blah. More content. Any more questions? So that's pretty much, you know, how many teachers go about their job. Where is the triggering event, Steve?
A light bulb must come on.
No question.
That's got to happen in the classroom. And that's where you see that's going to be your very effective teacher.
So you can tell a teacher does not have cognitive presence if you don't see one or more of those 4 qualities. And we have some examples here. Actually, we're going to talk a little bit about this. You know, we talked about setting high standards, challenging, inspiring, questioning students. You know, it's more than just saying, do we have any questions? No, let's move on. But it is challenging, providing high-level challenge, you know, at the top, you know, of Bloom's taxonomy, you know, that allows students to move on in their thinking.
But this is a cognitive presence in instructors and teachers, which demands an extremely high level of involvement and engagement on the part of that professional. If you don't have that, you're not going to be respected in the classroom, and students will understand, and you will not get that performance and achievement from your students because of the fact that you are not up to this particular standard.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, the notion, it is a challenge to the instructor and the teacher, but on the other end, it's a question of whether these outcomes are practical. And again, you know, I don't care what classroom we're talking about, Steve, the practical outcome in a K through 12 classroom is knowing the content, the application, and being competent, you know, in whatever those, you know, thinking and learning guidelines would be for that grade or that particular classroom. You know, in the adult learning arena, it might be about a job or professional standard, right, Steve?
It is, but it all comes down to that one word: transfer of knowledge. And that is what is absolutely essential for that instructor and teacher to have, that presence of mind and that awareness and that involvement to be able to enable these children and adults to transfer what's occurring in the classroom and to be able to use that. Absolutely.
I mean, so think about it. Triggering event. Is there a triggering event? Is there a way in which the learner transfers that learning into practice? I think that's really key. And here's another piece, and we aren't going to spend a lot of time on this. There's a lot of words on this slide, so I apologize for that. This is some work that does come from an adult educator, Stephen Brookfield, who talks about power in the classroom. Cognitive presence is about how much you allow the learner, the student, to control the classroom. And we're going to be talking about some of these other components coming up where power comes into play. But you know, classrooms where it's all dialed down, that the teacher controls, the teacher has a lot of rules and guidelines, You can't engage in doing anything in this particular classroom where the student has some ability to take initiative. That would be on the rigid end of this continuum of control. On the other end, you have a loose classroom where the experiences are allowed for the learner. The learner has input and control. The teacher serves more as a facilitator. And there's no right or wrong on this continuum, Steve. It really goes both ways any day, right?
Well, I think the most important thing about this particular slide and concept is understanding the fact that power is extremely important and a fact in any classroom, anywhere, at any time. The teacher who doesn't understand that power is involved and what they're doing with the students in the classroom, and the students also, they know what power means. They know what they can do in the classroom to achieve more or have less power. So I think a complete understanding of the topic of power, and typically teachers don't think about the fact of power in the classroom. They think perhaps about the topic of discipline or lesson planning or what to do at this moment or not. But power is a concept that must be totally understood because that's the basis of every classroom.
No question, no question. It was interesting. I asked Dr. Roth the other day as we were talking about this program. He has a background in special education, and I said, so Steve, if you're in a classroom like that, you're in a special ed classroom, is this model still apply? And Dr. Roth said to me, he said, students who have special needs are always clamoring for power. They are. It is a constant struggle, which might be really what is challenging and beautiful and all of the above about a special ed classroom.
And that's right? Why it's so important for that special ed teacher who understands that these children with special needs require special conditions and special consideration. And sometimes that can be abused. And it's that special ed teacher who must balance the different sides of the continuum of control in the classroom to be able to work with these children to get them to reach a point of learning and transfer, yet not taking away their feeling of being important and having power also in the classroom. So yes, that's why I always say I can take any special ed teacher and make him president of the United States because they're the best of the best, because they're dealing with extremely difficult situations in every classroom, and power is a very much part of it.
Really interesting, considering we weren't going to spend much time on power. It is really a big part of everything. But, there's a number of things. I kind of have a comparison here. Cognitive presence is about giving control. So we've talked about all of these things, giving choices, providing responsibility for special tasks, asking for opinions and thoughts, being open to criticism from the students, allowing them to tell you, that this isn't working for them. Also offering democratic opportunities or giving a special status for providing leadership in the school. Those are things that are pro-cognitive presence.
Well, when I look at this slide, one word jumps out at me. You just said it, leadership.
Yeah.
It's all about leadership.
No question. Every single successful teacher is a leader, no doubt. And they promote leadership among their learners.
Yep.
Yeah. This is an example of a professor that Steve and I like to use, who's all about taking control. Yeah.
When you see this type of a teacher or a professor who applies these types of activities, that can be very, very tedious for students, turn off students, and it gets students the feeling that they are not in control at all, and it's very rigid. That is not the way to obtain affinity and rapport in a classroom.
Well, absolutely. I mean, this example, and we know this example well, is all about providing many detailed instructions and steps.
Too many instructions.
Yeah, that end up in a result that is in the image, the idea, the vision of this teacher. And so that is taking control from the learner because you don't have that kind of flexibility. So without a doubt. So, we've talked a lot about cognitive presence. We're sort of wrapping it up here. But we want you to think about also in terms of assessment. Assessment's a major factor in how we determine cognitive presence. And, it's very easy, to test students and to ask what they know about the content, and that becomes the measure of cognitive presence. But there is a whole lot more to it. And you don't really get to the notion of whether cognitive presence is there simply by an achievement test. You have to do other kinds of assessment, and here are a few innovative ways that I'm sure you've seen done in many classrooms that are more work, but they're challenging, but they're creative, and they do test cognitive presence, right?
Well, as classroom teachers, I know all of you use all types of formative type of assessments, because this is how we really get to know what our students are doing, and actually we can see how their achievement will also give an assessment of how we are doing as teachers and the classroom instructors, and being able to properly and correctly have them achieve this transfer, which is so important.
Well, no question. And we did provide a few Google search sources for you to take a look at, and one really good one is from John Muller from North Central College. Provided these examples, but you'll find it when you look under the assessment toolbox. Really an interesting guide for all kinds of things. Just a few tips here as well as we move on to teaching presence here next, but giving activities, allowing students to reflect, that's a very Dewey-like approach that is a common best practice. Stimulating interest in a topic by creating that aha moment, that point of inquiry is important.
That light bulb.
Yeah, that light bulb's got to come on. Guiding students towards learning about the topic by showing enthusiasm for it, and ensuring that activities create a solution or an understanding, an outcome. So we encourage you to talk more about this. Use the chat room if you would like. We're more than happy to hear some of your ideas, because we think you have better ideas than we do. You teach it, live it every day.
Well, when I look at that past slide, I apply that to myself, and I look at the student evaluations at the end of the class term period, and I will see if I'm doing these things. Students will say it, and I'm not perfect. I don't know who is, of course, but we have to adapt, and we have to continue to reflect upon if we are providing these types of concepts to our students to have them achieve better. So it's always so important to have that reflective practice and be able to think back on, are we doing this? Are we achieving this? And students will always tell us.
They always do. They always do. They may not want to tell you because, quite often what I find, honestly, is I hear more from students when things are going well. Dr. Roth and I were just talking before the seminar about classes that are going well for us right now, and we get a lot of feedback on those classes. Quite often students are sending you a message when they say nothing, and that message is, you're not doing well. So
yeah, we get those sometimes.
You get both, of course, you know that. All right, well, we're going to move on now to the next, as you see our community engagement inquiry model. We're going to go on to the next major part of our three-legged stool. That is teaching presence. And Dr. Roth is going to give us a little bit of overview of what teaching presence is all about.
Well, when we look at teaching presence, there are a few things, of course, that come to my mind. Obviously, it's awareness. A teacher has to be in the moment. Teacher has to be totally involved in the entire processes of working with students, and making that those outcomes worthwhile, because as a professional educator, that's why we're in this business as such. We want what we're doing to be worthwhile to our students, but also to us. The presence of the teacher is not just something that a teacher has to have on their mind, but it's something that students also will see. Is the teacher available? Is the teacher approachable? These are two extremely important topics that students will always have on their mind, and it's something that cannot be under lack of consideration. Has to have that availability for students, approachability.
Well, yeah, and Dr. Roth, I often have a discussion with a colleague of mine about this. Is presence and availability the same thing? They are not.
No.
You can be available, but you may not be present. It has to be both. Teaching presence is about both, and so there are some important pieces to this that you would look for as signs of teaching presence in your classroom or in others' classrooms.
Well, I think the word here that I like so much is authentic presence.
Yes.
Are you generally there for the students, or you just there clocking in and clocking out? It can't be that.
Well, absolutely. It is about removing the obstacles that learners have, engaging them in a way where you are. I mean, the word I like is not on this slide, but it's about being a leader. Being a leader is knowing what the learners need and being able to engage them.
Well, the direct instruction, especially for special ed instructors and teachers, is so important, because we're doing a lot of differentiated instruction with students all the time. That is something that, it takes a lot of time. And teachers who are going to have a true and authentic and genuine natural presence must work harder, because it takes a lot to sit down with a student, every student, and work with them on an individual basis to get them to be able to reach their goals. That takes time, but a teacher must have that desire to do that.
Well, this part of the model is about these three things: design and organization, which is about how you structure the classroom, how you think about the approach to your learning, whether or not you're following and listening to that assessment that we just talked about, and whether you're using that to channel into how the next round, the next cycle of teaching and learning happens, and whether or not you're facilitating discourse. I mean, are we just going through, as I said before, muddle along, and then ask questions, muddle along some more, ask questions? I mean, that's not facilitating discourse.
No.
Discourse means that you have a feel for challenging one point of view with a different point of view, and that has to be there. So as we move on, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the pieces that are in teaching presence, and it is really about it's a significant determinant of learning and satisfaction and a sense of community. There have been a number of studies that are a part of this model and that are ongoing, that teaching presence in the classroom is critical to the development of the next phase, which is social presence. So they are interrelated.
They're totally interrelated, and we can see that the need to build community, that teacher must be totally focused on, is so important. To be able to build that community as a teacher leads us into that social presence, which is just as important as the other two, cognitive and teaching presence, but you can't have one without the other. But without teaching presence, without fomenting that desire to be a community, you won't be able to have this social presence that you'll need, that affinity to build community.
Well, there are a number of really important factors And I know Dr. Roth wants to talk about teaching radar. He loves that one.
I love it.
But a few of the critical parts of, these are the visible signs that that teaching presence is there, is that visibility of the teacher in the classroom, that presence versus available. There are mutually high expectations, a culture of questioning, where there's an engagement, setting high expectations, as I said before, for a dialogue to happen, guiding and supporting open and free dialogue and discussion.
Well, I think all of us who are teachers, especially those K through 12, know what teacher radar is and the significance of it. Working with one particular child in one side of the room, but you know what's happening on the other side. Later in a couple of months, Dr. Kuntz and I will be giving a presentation on withedness. And withedness is really, part and parcel the same thing as teacher radar, perhaps a bit more involved. But that's what teachers must have. All of these, that presence in the classroom, that visibility, that smile, but yet students understanding that you have them under your eye, that you know what's going on. Even if you're involved with one student or doing something else, they know you have eyes in the back of your head. And that's what's so important about having teacher radar. Without having that awareness, you're not in control of the classroom. And that's why students will see and will know if you have or don't have radar, and you will be in control or not of the classroom. If you lose that control, if you lose that awareness, you will not achieve cognitive nor social presence in the classroom.
Well, we have a few more examples that we want to provide, and then actually want to give you an approach, kind of an innovative approach. Utilizing tools and technology is really important. We talk about how many new tools, online tools, cell phones, smart boards, all of these things are tools and technology we have available. Teaching presence is about engaging those things, using those with learners, not avoiding them because they aren't they're the thing that we're afraid of. Also, constant communication, being available to students. In the online world, our students know us through our phones and through texting and through email. I mean, I don't know how many K-12 teachers are available through texting, but the notion of being available technologically and through media is important, because our learners today are used to having service in all ways, every day, 24 hours a day.
Well, this is absolutely true. Naturally, children today live on their cell phones, live on their pads. One of my grandchildren is in 9th grade, and they gave her an iPad to work on. That's what she does everything on. And it's constant communication with the classroom, with the school, and with the teacher. Perhaps she's not going to be texting, and I don't think K through 12 teachers will be texting back and forth with children from the classroom, but I'm pretty sure they'll be doing it with parents.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
And
emails as well, and telephones, conversation with parents almost constantly. So this is extremely important, and naturally for the children in today's modern society, communication is everything. The immediacy and availability, something I spoke about earlier. I've had professors in the past, and they were not available. I've had teachers that I didn't think they were available to me when I was a child, but that is so important to develop, because without having that, you're not going to obtain that rapport that child will need to feel good about coming to class every day. And this is especially true for those who are in special education. They need that extra something, that extra feeling of affinity and rapport with that teacher to make them want to come to school. Because sometimes they just don't want to come to school. They don't feel like they're valued or they're taken into consideration enough.
Well, or even just going through the motions. They're ignored. And, I think the key here is to sort of to be able to find a way to connect. And we're moving on. Actually, the social presence here is the third element, and we'll get more deeply into that relationship. One of the things that we've that really has kind of come into my perspective recently is an activity called role play, which I think applies in all kinds of classrooms, but it allows students to adopt a certain persona, a certain character, and play out a scenario. And it is an excellent way to have teacher presence. It promotes that.
It allows students to take on another persona, and they can free themselves in many ways when they do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we use an example here. This is a college classroom where we utilize our online discussion board to play different roles of parts of a liberal arts college, faculty, staff, administrators. But you can assign roles in all kinds of lessons, from history to cultural status, cultural situations. I just went to a graduation where of a high school student, a friend of mine, was talking about a role play in the graduation ceremony that one of the history teachers put on that was all about understanding the French Revolution. And they were talking about schmeckles, exchanging schmeckles. And so I thought that's very interesting. That's an example of the power of role play in that high school senior's life, was bringing out that one engaging activity that helped him learn.
Well, this is something that goes to our critical thinking and to be able to pass it on to the students, as well as being creative in the classroom. It isn't just we want to develop critical thinking and problem solving. We also want them to be creative, and by role play, this can do a lot for changing the setting and freeing up students to do different things and feel differently about themselves in the classroom.
Well, we provided some links to some ideas about role play, how to moderate, how to design it, how to apply it. And then also you can see a Google prompt here for using some of the keywords. But I think just in wrapping up teacher presence, we've talked about all of these things that are critical. Creating discourse, being creative, ensuring that activities have a clear outcome, and helping students to resolve issues are all great examples of this concept.
The last bullet's also very important when you create group activities, especially now in the era of the flipped classroom. Letting students take a lead in their own learning is very important. And this is what also children see of the teacher permitting them to be freer in the classroom and having a little bit more control. That's an important aspect.
Well, we do invite you to use the chat room to talk about teaching presence, provide any ideas you would like to add to the seminar. We think it's a very creative area and an engaging area where you can challenge your colleagues and you can really evaluate whether this element of the inquiry model is being applied. Now we'd like to move on to social presence, which is our last and final concept, and spend a little bit of time discussing what that is.
I think for a social presence, for let's say for us as professors, it's extremely important in the first few days of our classes, especially since it's an online environment, to have the students be able to build some type of rapport with us. We're going to talk about who we are. We're going to talk about our past, about what we like, and also who are they? What do they like? What type of food is your favorite? Where have you been in your life? Where you traveled? Different things that aid in connecting us as human beings, not just as professor and adult student, but also teacher and a K through 12 child. This is extremely important to begin to build that social presence, that social unity that's so important to obtain in a classroom, to have that rapport and affinity, to be able to build community.
You know, the other day, Dr. Roth, I heard on the news that the children in in the lives of an American child, let's say, the two people that are most important to them are their parents and their teachers.
Yeah.
I think that's very true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so just like we try to role model for our children, and try to control the type of person that we present to our children, teachers have the same responsibility. And without social presence, how can they know who we are?
Yeah. Well, all these studies on who we respect most in life, typically the president, Supreme Court, but teachers are usually up there, 1, 2, or 3 of who people respect in their lives.
No question.
Yeah.
No question. Well, you look at these 3 main categories, and these are the indicators, again, of social presence. Does an instructor, do you, or does a teacher that you're looking at have effective communication? Are they open? Do they openly communicate back and forth, two-way communication? Do they promote group cohesion? Because social presence isn't just about the teacher and the learner, it is also about the learner and the teacher. So it is about building that sense of common purpose.
This is, of course, I just mentioned it a few minutes ago. When we do our introductions, of course, try to talk about ourselves and who we are. But also this is important in the first day of class in any K through 12. It's always nice to know who the teacher is. And it's always nice to see that teacher who's providing a very nice smile and is talking to everyone and doesn't have a frown and shows that that person wants to be there, to be able to begin that effective communication with children in the classroom. It's so important to have that very nice smile, be positive, be friendly, be open, be available, be there. Talk to each one on a human-to-human level, even if they're young children. They need that. They need that smile. They need that effective approach.
Well, it has to be a genuine concern, fostering a genuine concern and showing that for each individual. And it's also about fostering an environment where students feel comfortable in asking questions and sharing opinions. There has to be a classroom that's safe.
Yeah.
Has to be open and safe. There has to be this notion that there is a peer-to-peer interaction that can go on between students. And as I said, it's 3-way. It's the teacher, it's the learner to the teacher.
And it's so important when you have a situation, especially in inclusive classrooms or classrooms which are special, children with special needs. There are always a lot of things going on. There's subtle bullying or not so subtle bullying, and it's how that teacher is able to handle that situation in the classroom to make that student not be afraid, not be intimidated to ask a question or feel they're going to be laughed at. The ability of that teacher will make or break that classroom and that child.
Yeah.
And that is the basis of why social presence is so important today.
Well, obviously, technology is a part of social presence. It's very interesting. A few years ago, I did I was an advisor to a student who did a study about whether social media could be part of the teaching network that a teacher and a learner have. And what he found is that it is very difficult, very, very difficult for schools to figure out what the right policy is and the right approach, because obviously there's fear. But the notion is that if we aren't a part of these media in some way, and I don't know that these particular media are the one we would choose, but the notion is we have to have media, even if it's special media, that allows communication to happen. And it might be through a classroom learning system that is already present in the classroom and not one of these public media.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Kynes in that it's difficult to decide on what type of policy you want regarding these different types of social media and one's activity. but for sure, the teacher and the instructor must be aware of them and sometimes monitor them. And absolutely in this time in our country, because so much is done on social media in their lives. Social media is their life right now. Mm-hmm. And we have to be aware of that, understand it, and also be very careful about it.
Well, Dr. Roth and I see through our program here, we have an instructional design program, incorporation of social media into learning systems. One of the hottest topics out there right now, Dr. Roth. I mean, there are a number of dissertations that are going on looking at these connections, and so I think that's one area we're going to hear a lot more about.
Not only that, there are a number of students who do their dissertations obtain their participants by going on social media and advertising for participants to come in and be involved in a study that they might be interested in. So social media isn't just for communication between children. It also can be used for research.
Very much so. No question. Well, we are very interested in knowing how you would apply social presence in a classroom. So your ideas are welcome to us in the chat line. We love these ideas. Dr. Roth and I are talking about this. He and I have done many different versions and variations of this talk. And many of the ideas we have put in have come from our discussions with teachers.
Absolutely.
So you are a part of this.
We learn from you.
We learn from you, no question. So we want to sort of wrap it up here. We're about out of time. There are a few best practices, and this sort of relates to the overall community inquiry model. But you need to look at the notion of a significant high level of passive and active participation. High levels of teaching and social cognitive presence, are a way to evaluate a classroom, and a responsiveness to grading, to classroom discussions, office hours. These are sort of the measuring stick we use.
And when we say a high level of passive and active participation, have to listen. Teacher must listen. But also you have to spend time in being responsive, in grading, in the classroom discussions, in making comments, being available for your students in your office hours. Or sometimes we receive phone calls at all hours of the day and night. Perhaps I don't want that to occur all the time, but I'm always available for my students. It might take time away, but it's something that I must give to my profession and the children and the students in my classroom.
Oh, no question. Present or available. Yes. I mean, you got to be both.
Yeah.
You got to be both, and that means you can't take when you're on, which could be any time that school is in session.
I may not answer every phone call at 10, 11 o'clock at night, but I will get back to them the next morning as soon as possible.
I do want to provide you with this great, I found this in one of our publications showing sort of a comparison. It's an interesting chart about the difference between social, cognitive, and teaching presence. And you can see it's sort of a nice summary of the many different things that we've talked about today and sort of put out there. We are always open to ideas. And would love any feedback, even if it's after the fact. The seminar is long gone and you're watching it recording.
Write us an email.
Send us an email.
Give us a call.
We want to know about your ideas, and we want to share them, and we want to engage with you because we want to be effective teachers ourselves in the way we talk about this topic. We would like to stop here, I guess, and thank you for your engagement with us today, and we look forward to